Good afternoon. It's Tuesday, the 27th of October 2015, just after 1 o'clock. Welcome to UK Column News. I'm your host, Brian Gerrish. With me in the studio, Mike Robinson.
Afternoon.
And we're going to be joined by live video link by Mike Mitcham from stopsmartmeters.co.uk.
No, .org.uk.
.org.
That's my fault. Again.
Stopsmartmeters.org.
.uk.
.uk.
Yes.
We got there. Okay, well, just before we get going with the news and bringing Mike Mitcham in as well, a few comments on the weather. Of course, Saturday appalling for anybody driving on the roads, just incredible. And then it seemed to change a bit on Sunday, and we're back with flooded roads in Devon, grey, pretty unpleasant, but sunny on the Isle of Man, I believe. And what else have we got? That's it. We've only got weather from the Isle of Man and a bit of rain in Plymouth. Well, the cold is a topical issue, not only because of climate change, as it's known, but also because the government wants to shorten remembrance ceremonies to protect the veterans. And I just had to bring up this article from the Telegraph. This is a picture that's been used before. I just find this so offensive. Here are these men standing up, remembering veterans people who fought, died, lost limbs for Britain. And these are, of course, the very men committing treason by handing UK over to foreign powers, amongst which the European Union, of course, continues to take the lead. But why has this story appeared in the press? Well, because their scheme for cutting the whole thing short was to say, well, if you're an opposition party, you're not worth very much. So you're all going to have to club together to put your wreaths down. Obviously, the important people, David Cameron and the rest of the government, they're allowed to lay their wreaths separately. But if you're an opposition walla, then you've got to do it together.
So the real hypocrites get the extra time, is that it?
The real hypocrites get the extra time, and we're going to say, although we have put quite a bit of criticism into the SNP over the last few months, it was actually the SNP who said, no, this is not going to happen, so it appears that the government's backed away. Well, what we're really seeing with David Cameron and his team in power is the future. And if we really want to get into the future, then of course we've got to come back to common purpose. So thank you very much to the person who said, were we aware of this, which we weren't altogether. But we've got common purpose student experiences partnering with the All China Youth Federation. So what was it all about? 30 exceptional students at leading universities in the UK and China took part in the inaugural Student Leader Innovation Experience. The programme was delivered by Common Purpose Student Experiences in partnership with China Youth Daily under the patronage of All China Youth Federation. And that was sponsored by Union Pay International, the global arm of China Union Pay, who have operations across 5 continents. This did not give me a warm feeling, Mike. We've got young people selected as future leaders. Well, who selected them? Common purpose. Where's the democracy in that? Absolutely none. And now these people are being teamed up with Chinese leaders to make decisions on our lives in the future. Perhaps it'd be good to bring in Mike Mitcham and see what he's got to say on that. Are you there, Mike? Yes, he is.
Mike, you need to unmute. That's it.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hello, Plymouth. Hi. I don't know probably as much as I should do about this organisation. I know Brian's spent a lot of time talking about it, but we can't keep track of all these issues. I do have a view on the commemoration cutbacks, if you're interested in that.
Go for it.
I think it's going to upset a lot of people in the armed forces, and they're not really the kind of people that you want to upset. It's clearly incredibly disrespectful when we could afford to bail out insolvent banks, but we can't afford to commemorate people that have fought and died for us. It's a very sad state of affairs, and I know from personal experience that my dad organised the only commemoration that took place in up in Southport, where I'm from, for VJ Day that took place, the commemoration of VJ Day over summer, and nothing would have been celebrated. Southport has a memorial, a cenotaph, and he is connected with a former World War II pilot who flew Spitfires over Japan during, and before victory over Japan. And having connected with him, they both got their heads together to make something happen. But if it wasn't for that, the council weren't interested, the papers weren't initially interested, but they made something happen, and it was marked. But there are cutbacks on this kind of thing, and it's a great shame.
A great shame indeed. I'm just going to keep these two a little bit together, because if you follow Common Purpose action through, of course, what Common Purpose is determined to do is break down national identity. Everything is to do with diversity and creating one global population. This is where they're going. So we don't want commemoration of the war in its correct sense. We recognise death and suffering on all sides, but remembering the fallen is something which is done nationally, not only in Britain but other countries as well. We need to gently remove that sort of thing, because we're moving on to the new future system of world identity and governance. But have a look at this man who's hovering around in the background of all this. We've got Jeremy Hunt, the Health Secretary. And if we go back to September this year, we were not aware this went on, or I certainly wasn't. UK-China people-to-people talks set the vision for state visit. And if we get into a little bit of the detail on that, the Chinese Vice Premier Liu will meet the Prime Minister and the Foreign Secretary, and will chair the people-to-people sessions with Jeremy Hunt, Secretary of State for Health. And she was going to be meeting the Welsh First Minister before visiting the Rutherford Appleton Laboratory in Oxfordshire. Let's bring in Common Purpose again. This is what they were actually up to. So the leg of their programme was during the week of the third UK-China people-to-people dialogue, and here's Jeremy Hunt mentioned there. Along with the Great Britain China Centre, students on the programme formed the youth strand at the plenary session of the dialogue, asking questions of the delegation about education, obesity, sport and youth exchanges between the two countries. Well, of course, we've shown many times that it's been the infiltration of Common Purpose into the NHS, which has utterly destroyed it. Jeremy Hunt has presided over a failing NHS, but what's he doing? Well, he's busy working with the Chinese and saving the world. I think this is where these people are really dangerous. They're not living in the now and dealing with day-to-day problems. They're living in the future environment.
Well, I mean, the Chinese at the moment are clearly looking at Britain as being an utterly bankrupt institution and available for, well, not so much takeover, but certainly there's plenty of opportunity for them, shall we say. But actually, I think they need to be very careful, because they're inviting the beast into their own country, in a sense, if they let this lot in.
So Common Purpose reverse engineered into China. You set it up initially, you get them used to it. I think it's a good idea. And then those Chinese students will be used inside China to break apart traditional Chinese nationality, history,
indeed, family life.
I think you could well be right on that, Mike.
Right, well, let's move on to privacy issues. This is the cybersecurity bill in the United States. It's ready to be passed, CISA, as it's called. And two interesting aspects to this. I'm going to ask Mike to comment on this in a second, but two really interesting aspects on this. And that is, first of all, the way it's going to work is that there will be cyber threat indicators established. Companies will set up algorithms to recognize cyber threats, any activity on the internet, on their websites, whatever it is, which may be considered a threat. And those indicators will be shared with the Department for Homeland Security. The Department for Homeland Security, in turn, are then free to share those share that data with whomever they like. So they might share it with the CIA, the NSA, FBI, ATF, whichever three-letter acronym you want to use. They're going to be entitled to share it with. But the really interesting aspect to this is the fact that the companies involved are going to be given protection from prosecution in the event that any of the information that is identified doesn't result in data being protected in some way. So if there's any breach of data protection, or the data is handed to a three-letter acronym and there's a breach of data protection there in some way, then in fact there's going to be immunity from prosecution for the companies involved.
So, sorry to interject here, Mike, is this, was TalkTalk a setup?
No. So this is in the United States, but the point here is that if TalkTalk had happened in the United States, then TalkTalk under this immunity provision wouldn't even be required to tell their customers that there'd been a problem.
Yeah.
And that I think, Mike, I think you'll agree, that is horrendously dangerous.
Yeah, and especially when you put the smart meters and smart grid and the Internet of Things into context as well, which we're going to cover today. What we're doing is generating in very short order with the Internet of Things and smart meters massive amounts of new data, as well as 440 million new entry points into what is essentially the internet. So we are laying the foundations right now for the cybersecurity threats that are going to happen in the future. And so these kinds of protections, it's a good point that you raised, Brian. It seems to be strange timing, doesn't it, with TalkTalk? And what TalkTalk's shown 3 times this year now, once in August and another in February, is that our defences are essentially wide open. And what we've shown as well over the last couple of years with our campaign is that there are essentially open doors with smart meters as well, providing the ability to launch new types of cyber attacks, both from smart appliances and the home, and to them. So it is very dangerous ground that we're treading here.
Mike, you wanted to start your section with a video clip. Can you tell us, this was the second, you wanted to put the second one first, so can you just give us a bit of introduction to that?
Well, I think it's worth maybe trying to unpack how the smart meter agenda is being positioned with the public at the moment. And as much as I hate to do it, we're going to run the advert that's currently on YouTube, but I think will be hitting our screens in the near future, that's been put together by Smart Energy GB with a budget of £100 million. This is what we're up against.
Okay, thanks very much. Happy to help. Hiya, sorry for the wait.
Should I avoid those?
Oh, no, it's fine, I do that. That, these, and that. Okay, right. Let's have a think.
You haven't scanned anything, have you?
Oh, no, we don't scan it. We estimate. 48 pounds. Nope, scrap that. It's heavier than I thought. 78 pounds. I estimate that to be about 17 pounds.
Estimate?
We just estimate. We don't just estimate how much it's going to cost. If it works out that it's actually worth more, then when you come back, we'll overestimate next time, so it levels out. That's the way the system works.
Can I speak to your money, do you?
Janice, just give me a hand really quick.
But once he has on the estimate, like that's the price. Yeah.
Like fixed prices that it says on the company on a barcode.
So that was where I got stuck.
If you haven't used all the stuff, we will give you money back. Say, like, if you just kept, like, 2 sardines back, we would give you money when you came back.
She just wants to do like I want to do, is have my items scanned. I want to pay the price and take them away.
That way madness lies, do you know what I mean?
No, I don't. I think madness lies in your system.
Do you want him to make the sound? Like, boop. It's just an estimation at the end of the day.
We'll send you the total bill in the post, OK? And I estimate that'll come to you in 2, maybe 3 days.
We don't estimate our shopping bills, so why do we estimate our energy bills? By 2020, every home in Britain can upgrade to a smart meter.
If you went elsewhere, it'd just be the same.
Concept. Okay, thanks very much. Happy to help.
Well, Mike, at the moment, my supplier for electricity is British Gas, and what they're doing is sending me estimated bills on a regular basis, claiming that I owe them hundreds and hundreds of pounds, when in fact I know that I don't. And it's really this type of, we've got this kind of propaganda coming at us on one hand, on the other hand we've got this intimidation from the vendors themselves to try and force us to put. It's absolutely clear that the agenda, that their intention is that I'm going to get so annoyed by these bills that they're going to encourage me to put a smart meter in.
Yeah, and the bills won't stop. They won't get lower, which we've shown time and again. You know, in almost all pilot studies that have happened, bills don't reduce after smart meters have been installed. In fact, they go up in 80% of cases, on average by 50%, as one study by Toronto Hydro showed. But they won't get the energy suppliers off your back either. If you have a different kind of meter, there's still a propensity for these meters to overcharge and for you to still be hassled by these companies. But the problem that we have with this kind of advertising is that it's incredibly deceptive, because the conclusion that the viewer is asked to draw from that advert is that having a smart meter will just be like paying for the things that you use when you go to the supermarket, and that's it. And it could not be further from the truth. What we have right now, and what you should have, Mike, with your energy provider, is the ability to say, this is the energy that I've used, and this is what I owe you. Or you bill me and tell me what I owe you on a regular basis. But with the way in which this advert is pitched, and with the reality of smart meters, to push the analogy further with the supermarket, you're going to have a CCTV camera and corporations sitting over your back whilst you're moving around the supermarket, looking at what you're looking at, and constantly reporting that back to third parties before you even get to the till. I mean, we can talk about the health implications, and we'll come on to that later as well. But the reality of what people are going to be allowing into their door through their home with the smart meter is far from how Smart Energy GB are trying to position it.
And of course, something that the large suppliers are already doing is they're deliberately not sending people out to read meters anymore in order to exacerbate this problem.
Yeah, absolutely. And even with some customers who already have smart meters, people are still having to come around and read the meters manually.
Yes. Oh, really? I didn't know that. How does that? I thought that was the whole point of these things, that didn't have to happen.
Well, that's one of the claimed points, that won't have to happen. But one of the problems is that smart meters aren't designed to last as long as the more traditional meters. So they're going to require more servicing. They're going to require firmware updates. They're going to require regular replacement as the new breed of smart meter comes out. Because we live in a time of built-in obsolescence, and as the smart grid emerges as a reality and new corporations and companies build propositions and ideas around how this viewing glass into your home can be exploited and monetized further, then you can expect the smart meter to have capabilities in the future that we can only dream of.
Okay, so what was the next video we're going to look at? This is about the Internet of Things.
So I think what's maybe getting a bit closer to the reality of things was positioned by the EU a couple of years ago with the Internet of Things, if people aren't clear about this, is the concept of putting tiny RFID, so radio frequency identification tags, into everything that you can possibly imagine. So where we're talking about things like smart washing machines, smart toasters, smart fridges, smart TVs, etc. These smart appliances are capable, in the case of a smart fridge, for example, of communicating with RFID chips that you'll find on packets of products that you buy, and then reporting that data to you and also to your energy provider and third parties that are interested in figuring out not just what you're buying in the supermarket, which your store card tells the supermarkets about you, but also how you're using those products, when you're using those products, what your kind of behaviours is with them at home. So this Internet of Things is coming, and this is how the EU are positioning it.
It's crazy that we doubled our use of energy in the last 50 years. We can't keep this up.
1,400 transport units, 520,000 kilometres per day, 1,750 hours of travel.
What do I need? Milk, eggs, bacon, fish sticks, condoms. Oh, chewing gum.
Yes, hello? No, I
Still need to order bandages.
Okay.
There aren't any more needles. Where's the...
I'll put you through.
Oh, and I still need to do this.
Don't you have the feeling we're standing still all the time? Why has it become part of our lives?
Isn't it strange that roads are getting longer? Shouldn't evolution make the world more efficient?
And while we're standing still, we pollute even more.
Why can't we focus on people instead of procedures?
What if objects start to sense and communicate, becoming tools to help us deal with complex and urgent situations?
What if all objects were interconnected? What if there was an Internet of Things?
With the Internet of Things, applications are infinite. We could be able to monitor our transport better, winning precious time at any turn, way beyond smart logistics as we know it.
With an Internet of Things, we could be able to monitor from a distance. Instead of spending time in a hospital, people could actually live their lives.
Emptying our carts would be a thing of the past. It would also limit forgetfulness. We wouldn't even need a shopping list. We could easily ping our refrigerator at home to tell us what's missing.
If we want to be smart about energy, we could let energy be smart about itself. With the Internet of Things, we could be able to manage our world differently, adding a new dimension to the Internet as we know it.
The Internet of Things, part of our future.
So, Mike, the observant amongst us will have noticed this slide or this image at the end of that video, which seems to bear some resemblance to that one.
Absolutely, Mike. What we have behind the scenes at the EU and other such organisations are intense lobbying activities on behalf of mega corporations, and one of those mega corporations that has a huge hand in the smart agenda, as I will call it, who are pushing smart into every major industrial sector that you can think of, is IBM. And so this decision by the EU to promote the idea of smart metering, and the UK's decision to promote the idea of smart metering, was actually not conceived in the head of Ed Miliband when he was the Environment Minister. It was conceived in the boardrooms of massive tech firms and potentially banking institutions as well, who are providing the finance. So IBM's track record in developing and promoting population surveillance technology is not the most envious one that you can imagine.
And that's
IBM,
that is that poster on the right hand side was
right.
Yes.
So IBM developed Hollerith, which, if people aren't familiar with Hollerith, was used by the German government in the 30s and 40s to identify, profile, and track individuals. And what we see here is, with the scene in the Hollerith advert, is a town with the backdrop of what's essentially a punch card, because that's how Hollerith worked. You have this light beam coming out of an all-seeing eye, which is just bizarre, and off-center triangle, and then a couple of lampposts. And it just strikes me as a strange choice of imagery to revamp for promoting another population tracking technology that the very same firms that were involved in tracking and profiling people during World War and before World War II is being used again.
Well, I just wanted to highlight this one as well, because of course it's government as well. This is the DARPA program, the Information Awareness Office program that John Poindexter set up in the early 2000s, 2001 I think it was. And the same imagery again, the eye with the beam coming out, and this time looking at the whole world. And the whole idea of total information awareness is really what we're talking about here with the Internet of Things, isn't it?
That's exactly right. And I think that's an important point, Mike, that you raised, because I'm not sure that DARPA and this Total Information Awareness Office concept as a brand was moved forward, because if you want to set up a complete surveillance grid, you don't put an all-seeing eye pointing a beam at the entire world and call it total information awareness.
No, well, indeed, it wasn't
the Internet of Things.
That's right. It wasn't moved forward as a program, but actually many of the developments out of that program ended up in PRISM and all these other NSA operations. So it didn't go under that brand because, as you write, at the time there was such a backlash because of that particular imagery that they just couldn't proceed.
Yes, indeed.
So you've got a couple of graphs here.
Yeah, 10 points if you can tell me what this represents, or more specifically where the arrow is pointing.
Well, I get 0 then. Brian?
This is a. If you move on to the next slide, this is the number of posts between you and an individual in a run-up to you changing your status on Facebook to being in a relationship with that person. So from, let's say, 100 days out, right at the start of when you start engaging with this person, talking to them, dating them, etc., the number of posts between you has a steady increase. And then it drops off a fair amount. Then you change your status, and then your interactions are offline, presumably, rather than online in the main cases. And the reason I thought it was interesting to mention this is that it's in the concept of privacy and also in the concept of these corporations. Where on that timeline do you know that you're going to start a relationship with this person and end up changing your status on Facebook to in a relationship with them? And where on that timeline does Facebook know that you're going to be in a relationship with that person? And as we've seen from stories where Facebook have been, in fact, quite open about the fact that they are engaged essentially in social engineering projects where they are restricting certain kinds of posts that people will see to determine whether or not that affects people's moods. This is just a snapshot of one element of what we are giving away in data. And this is important because data is currently being described as the new oil. And it's an incredibly offensive term because when you really think about it, data is you and me. We use technology and these services to extend our capabilities. We use GPS, we use traditional phones. We use them to connect and do things that we would otherwise do through conventional traditional means, but they are essentially extending what we do. And as a result, the data that's generated is part of who we are, but it's being seen as the next gold rush, the next opportunity for consumer exploitation and monetization. And so the issue that we have here is that whilst this is just one example of how Facebook is capable of getting insights into what we do, with the smart grid and all the new data that's going to be generated, there's other things that we're going to be telling these corporations and organizations about ourselves that we probably don't even know ourselves. And the question then is, we have corporations that are getting ahead of us who are able to determine what we're going to do before we know what we're going to do. And when you live in an environment in which the mantra is profit, profit, profit by these corporations, and we could look at the root causes of that associated with usury and fractional reserve banking, everybody's trying to stay on aboard the ship as it's sinking. The issue is that they have to get further into our lives, and what the smart meter is doing is providing that looking glass. So let's take a look at the next slide about how this actually applies.
So this is assisted living.
Yeah, so this is a slide from a presentation that you can find online on the website of a company called Onzo. They're a data analytics company, and I believe they do some kind of data mining, data analysis technology or services. And I grabbed this from the presentation because it's actually quite revealing. And bear in mind when I'm saying this, that the way in which smart meters are being presented to the public right now is what you saw with Estimated Nation. This is how one company is seeing the capabilities for smart meters that most people will never see. So this assisted living slide, it's talking about smart meters. It's saying monitoring appliance usage in the home means that activity about the individual can be inferred, giving an indication of changes in their behavior. And changes in behavior often indicate the onset of illness, particularly infections such as urinary tract infections, which can impact memory. These can often be the precursor to falls. Therefore, early detection of changes in behavior allows intervention before there are major complications. So is this slide suggesting to you that if British Gas detect that you might have a UTI, they can send help or some pills in the post to you? No, it doesn't, because that's none of British Gas's business. But it is the business of organisations that they're partnered with, selling your data. And this is just one example, again, of the kind of data that's being generated to other third parties who are queuing up around the block to get their hands on essentially all of the information that they can infer from your appliance usage through the smart meter and your smart appliances, how you're behaving at home on a day-to-day basis, how you're behaving, how your family's behaving. So it's incredible the kind of data rape that Ian Crane calls it, that's going to be perpetuated by these meters, and people just aren't being told these kinds of facts by the big advertising programs that are positioning this.
I mean, whenever people whenever this is explained to people, many people's first reaction is, well, we've got to hide from it in some way. The only way to stop it is to not have this in our homes. Don't give our data away. Don't sign up for Facebook. Don't do these things. It has always seemed to me, going back to the days of the store cards, whenever there were when there were campaigns in place where people were swapping store cards from one part of the country to the next, that poisoning the database has got to be the only way that this can be dealt with, because this is so insidious and so ubiquitous that it's, you walk down the street and you've got 20 CCTV cameras looking at you. But it seems to me that instead of blocking advertising on the internet, we should be clicking on every advert that we possibly can, particularly if we don't like the product, because A, that means that the company that we don't like is paying some money to a website that we do like, but B, it means that in fact the information we're giving that company is useless, because they then cannot track our habits and our advertising habits and advertise at us in response. It seems to me that is the only way that we're going to deal with this, is to give false information and find ways of giving more and more false information.
I do think it's one way, and if you have the knowledge and capabilities and appetite for doing that, then by all means do it. But I'm not sure how many people that would be sustainable for, and how many people would need to reach for that to be effective. Because if there are a couple of outliers, there's a small percentage of the population that do that, there's still a huge population who are having their data harvested on a day-to-day basis that aren't engaged in that kind of activity. So my advice would be, we're trying to raise awareness about this kind of thing via our website, via our talks, via our conference that we've got going on next week, which will focus purely really on the health issues next week. But open up a front against this program in your own home, because unlike many of the other issues that we are dealing with today, your energy company needs you to open the front door and let one of these things into your home. And my view is that we don't necessarily need to alert people, or people don't need to be on board with the fact that they do have privacy that they should cover, that people have fought and died to protect in the past. They might not be concerned about the growth health implications that are going to happen with smart meters. They might not be concerned about the prospect of higher bills. But if you can just get somebody to say no on whatever basis they feel is appropriate, then as far as I'm concerned, that's a success.
Okay, well, you mentioned the conference. Tell us a little bit about that.
So next Sunday, we have a fantastic panel of speakers descending on Rawson Hall in Bolney in mid-Sussex. And this is our second conference. We had Get Wired, the first Get Wired conference back in 2013. Some of the same speakers are coming, some new ones. We have Dr. Martin Blank speaking via a video link. Dr. Blank is a doctor at the Columbia University in New York City, and he was the lead behind the recent UN appeal to Ban Ki-moon, which has now been signed by over 200 scientists calling for urgent action on artificial man-made electromagnetic fields, which smart meters have as part of their wonderful feature set. So the issue that we have, in short, with these health issue with the health implications of smart meters is that information carrying pulsed microwaves are intensely bioactive with humans and other animals and our ecology. It very much depends on your proximity as well. And intensity windows play a part in it. But if you have one or more smart meters in your home, as many people have shown us, there is a chance that you will get ill from it. And the kind of diseases that are associated with this kind of radiation go all the way from headaches through to insomnia, because it disrupts your melatonin production, through to other more serious ones like cancer. So we're going to be lifting the lid on this issue with medical doctors, researchers, people who are actively involved in doing surveys of people's homes to remediate them and make them electromagnetically safe. So it's going to be a great event, and if you're able to come along, we've tried to keep the price as low as possible. We have hiring costs for the venue, for all the AV equipment that we're using. We're going to get a videographer there as well, which isn't cheap. And so depending on your income, and it's up to you how much you pay essentially. We've put ticket prices from £10 to £25. We're going to have lunch available as well to buy. But if you can afford it, you have the time, then please come down, and I'm sure it will be a really fantastic event to be at.
And more information at getwi.red.
That's it.
Brilliant. Okay. Well, thank you, Mike. We will move on with the rest of the news. But if you've got any more comments on anything we cover here, please jump in. We're going to start off with this. Brian, I'm going to ask you for a bit of comment here because, well, what can we say? The Times, not just the Times, I've picked on the Times because it's just ridiculous, but lots of different media covering this, that Putin's subs are targeting internet cables. Russia, according to the Times, is exploring plans to cut undersea communications cables, which carry nearly all the world's internet traffic. If tensions with the West escalate, defense officials have warned. What do you say?
What I say is it's old news which is being regurgitated to achieve a modern political objective. So this was going on since the very beginning of the Cold War. It's been going on ever since submarines have been reasonably capable to try and target underwater communications cables or target underwater detection cabling, particularly for submarine detection equipment. This has been going on for years and years and years. All sides are doing it. All nations with major submarine capacity have been doing it. So this is an old story, I believe, just rehashed in order to try and put more pressure on the Putin is a bad man image. Pathetic is really the word I'd add after that, but there we go.
Okay, well, in the meantime, in the South China Sea, we seem to have a good cop, bad cop thing going on between the US and Britain here at the moment, and China. So UK, obviously the good cop, but the US deciding that the best thing that they can do is to drive a destroyer within the 12-mile, national, close to the islands in the South China Sea, which of course are under dispute. But nonetheless, China sees that as their sovereign territory. And the Chinese said these actions of the US warship are a threat to the sovereignty and security of China and safety of people living on the islands. They damage peace and stability in the region. In this regard, the Chinese side expresses extreme dissatisfaction and strongly protests. Well, in the meantime, Australia can't keep its snout out. And so they are saying that they strongly support US activity in the South China Sea. Australia has a legitimate interest in the maintenance of peace and stability, they said, respect for international law, unimpeded trade and freedom of navigation and overflight in the South China Sea. Approximately 60% of Australia's exports pass through the South China Sea. Now, I would imagine you've passed through the South China Sea in your time, and so the question in my mind is, how big is the South China Sea, Brian? I mean, I imagine it must be really hard to avoid sailing within 12 miles of any landmass that happens to be there.
Well, that could be true, Mike, but I've got to say that sending warships close to territorial waters, traditionally known as an act of putting pressure on or stirring up a situation, on the other hand, quite normal. But the thing I've got to say here is that isn't this the same China that's being invited into Britain to help rebuild nuclear infrastructure?
That's what I mean by the good cop, bad cop thing.
Yeah, so there's something quite ridiculous going on here. On one hand, we're being told, of course, that China is a very dangerous threat, so the Americans continue the patrols off the Chinese coast, and here we've got an act designed to ramp up tension. David Cameron is saying, well, don't worry, you come on into UK and help us out rebuilding high-speed trains, nuclear infrastructure. There is, I think we're now seeing the breakdown of this, of politics on not only a national stage, but world stage. There's something else going on here, isn't it? You can't have China as an enemy, but rebuilding your nuclear infrastructure.
Indeed.
It's a scam.
Well, another scam that's at work is in Ukraine as they try to rebuild tensions there again, this time in Odessa. Now, Odessa's in the western end of the area that would be considered pro-Russian. Of course, in the summer, who did they put in charge of Odessa? They put Mikhail Saakashvili in charge. Now, he, of course, was the president of Georgia during the South Ossetian conflict in 2008. And in fact, in 2008, he said, speaking about Georgia, we are the fighting ground for a new world war. Russia was the target in 2008. That was really the beginning of the real ramp up towards bombarding Russia with the war drums. Of course, Saakashvili himself, here he is, laughing boy himself. He is a George Soros stooge, was put into Georgia with George Soros money, became the president and led the Rose Revolution there. But he, of course, as I say, in charge of Odessa. It did slip my mind there for a second. They've just had an election, and he's pretty upset about the result because it's not quite the result that he wanted. And so he's saying that there's electoral fraud going on. He's saying that there should be a criminal investigation of the manipulation that were going on there. And of course, what he is absolutely doing is attempting to ramp up the tensions within Odessa, and because his target is Putin. He despises Putin with a passion, and so do the people that are pulling his strings. So that is his target, and we continue to see the situation in Ukraine begin to build again, yes.
Well, if the trouble is there in front of our eyes, we've been warning about the BBC's role in stirring up dissent and unhappiness in overseas countries, in particular the BBC's charity, BBC Media Action. But the other thing the BBC is going flat out to do at the moment is to make sure that the British political system and establishment is not embarrassed over any paedophile accusations. So we've got a BBC article here, which we're saying is a blatant nudge. What have we got? Well, we've got a Carmel College teacher. He's been jailed for 19 years. I think it's for some 16 offences over 20 years. What is the message from the BBC? It's all historic, it's all ordinary people, it's dirty old men in raincoats, it's teachers. It is everything but anybody connected with the political scene in Westminster. So I think we're going to see more of these articles rammed home by the BBC. We just put in here, it was interesting, in 1973, the Observer described this particular school as the Jewish Eton. And my point with this is, if that is true, then obviously this school would have been pumping Jewish candidates into prime jobs. But the BBC would have us believe, of course, that there is no VIP paedophile ring. And they've been going flat out to defend Leon Britton along with all the other mainstream press. So the Guardian here now picking up on ban the media for naming sex abuse suspects before charge. Top lawyer has come out with this. This is the particular lady, Alison Levitt QC, and she said the aim would be to protect the reputation of people such as the late Lord Britton, who was named in the media as a suspect over a historical allegation of rape, but denied without being told by police that they wouldn't bring charges. So they ignore the fact it wasn't just rape allegations. You concentrate on the rape. Poor Mr. Britton, you've got to defend him. And I'm going to use the expression here deliberately. This is a satanic inversion of justice and the law. You ignore the victims and the crime. What's this woman keen to do? Protect the establishment. And if we follow her through, this is her company, lawyers Mishcon de Reya. Have a look at her. It's quite interesting reading about her. Prim and proper, Miss Prim and Proper. She's going to be defending establishment people who are, of course, forcefully accused, because if you're a politician, if you're a VIP, you can't possibly be a paedophile. Well, the BBC got onto this one. Sex crime suspects deserve anonymity, MPs say. So they're really hammering this, and in the statement there should be a statutory ban on identifying people who are arrested for sexual offences in England and Wales, a committee of MPs has said. Well, the interesting thing about this is to have a look at the committee itself, and this is the Home Affairs Select Committee, and who is the man running that? Well, it's none other than Keith Vaz. And virtually everybody in the country should be interested in this man, because he, of course, is a safe pair of hands, because he's got a track record of helping to close down abuse cases. So the Guardian here pointing out that Keith Vaz helped kill a 90s probe into the Grenville Janner claims, and they're saying, why is he silent now? The journalist for this article said, last week in The Observer, I described how my 1991 investigations into allegation of child sex abuse by former Leicester MP Grenville, now Lord Janner, were brought to a halt by supportive statements in the Commons from MPs. Key among them was that by Vaz, who said that his close colleague had been the victim of a cowardly and wicked attack. Well, we could go in a slightly different direction here. This is Russia Today. They're saying child abuse victims suffer death threats after a minister published their names online. Survivors of child abuse claim they've endured death threats after a Commons Committee chairman published swathes of emails containing the names of the victims. Well, who was that? Well, surprise, surprise, that just happened to be Mr. Vaz, who uploaded the emails onto the Commons official website. So it takes John Mann MP to comment properly on this. Keith Vaz demands anonymity for child abuse suspects, but says nothing and speaks to no one about the rights of child abuse survivors. So this is the man then put in the position of power to be interrogating others. Hypocrisy, Mike, what do you think?
It's all completely upside down, isn't it? Like you say, The people that seem to be getting no protection here are the victims. It's just,
I think that's
not good.
The grunt says it all. Somebody earlier on in the chat room, when you were talking about smart meters, smart technology, said, well, the shame is we haven't got any smart MPs. We certainly haven't. We've got despicable people, certainly some criminals, and certainly people involved in paedophilia prepared to cover it up. So we just thought we'd show here Westminster closing ranks with the title Dirty but Lubricated Against Failure. And who are we going to bring in? Well, it's got to be Keith Vaz, Home Affairs Select Committee Chairman. We shouldn't forget that he was sacked as Europe Minister in 2001 following the claims that he'd helped billionaire Hinduja brothers acquire British passports. What's his connection? Well, he was also legal officer Islington, and that brings us nicely to Labour MP Margaret Hodge, because she was outed, she was accused in the 1990s of complacency over allegations of serious sexual abuse against children in the authorities' care. So what did Tony Blair do? He thought she'd be the best person to be Children's Minister in 2003. So nice little link there with Mr. Vaz, who was working for Islington as legal officer, but of course he would not have known what was going on at all. And The Independent on the 3rd of January 2014 said of Mr. Vaz, for he's one of the UK's most glamorous and influential British Asians, longest serving, been an MP of Leicester since 1987, member of the Privy Council, chairman of the Home Affairs Committee since 2007. He spent much of his 26 years in the corridors of power, mired in near scandals, actual scandals, watchdog scrutinies, leaks, accusations, investigation, complaints, and suspension. And this is the man now running what happens over the serious issue of abuse. It can't be an accident that these people are put in this particular position. Just let me continue so that we've got the theme. Well, of course, Bernard Hogan-Howe, boss of the Met Police, was to be called in front of the committee to talk about his role in the Leon Britton affair. This is a picture of Mr. Leon Britton. Remember, he is the victim. But Bernard Hogan-Howe decided he was going to go and give a 20-minute talk in Oman, paid for by the taxpayer, paid for by the Met Police. So he sent a couple of his colleagues in his place. Assistant Commissioner Patricia Gallen and Deputy Assistant Commissioner Steve Rodhouse. They were questioned in his place about the Met's handling of the Britton sex allegation case. Mike, I have to say, because it's getting impossible, you just couldn't make this up.
I did wonder, I did watch that inquiry by the Home Affairs Committee and did wonder why those two were there. And you've just cleared it up for me. That explains it all.
Well, he had a...
She was particularly nasty, actually, in that she was particularly arrogant and really wasn't prepared to accept any criticism whatsoever.
No. Meanwhile, he presumably went out first-class business to Oman, gave a 20-minute talk in a hotel, £160 a night. Sounds pretty cheap to me, but there we go. All paid for, so he did not have to answer any embarrassing questions. So let's see how the magic circle of safe hands works. We need this lady, of course, Theresa May, Home Secretary. So we had Sir Bernard Hogan-Howe. He's failed rape victims. Of course, that's been going on for many years. The police's handling of rape victims has been appalling. And he's also been running a force which has been intimidating its own police officers who've been blowing the whistle on child abuse. So he's a good person to have in the circle. Then we need Eilish Angelini, former Procurator Fiscal up in Scotland. She fails Holly Gregg in the Holly Gregg child abuse case and also has been implicated in legal threats to child abuse campaigners. Obviously, you need her as part of your close cabal. There he is, Mr. Vaz himself, with a record of protecting the accused and silencing the victims. And then a highly experienced woman, here she is, Justice Goddard. She's refused to help protect child abuse survivors and whistleblowers. We know this because the UK column's now got that in writing. She is not interested in protecting the whistleblowers. And of course, she loses key survivor statements. So presumably they were a bit hot to handle. And oh dear, despite smart technology, Mike, all of that information disappeared. We shouldn't forget this man, Peter Wanless, Chief Executive of NSPCC. This organisation is everywhere. You cannot report child abuse without going through NSPCC. And one of our viewers pointed out that he even attends the Met Gold briefings. So he's in at strategic level with the Met Police. You think you are reporting to an independent inquiry. No, you're not. You're reporting to NSPCC. So if we join up all the wagons, what you then need is to keep out common sense, and you definitely don't want the public involved because you need the right people to be safe hands to cover up, I suppose, Mike.
Yeah, so Peter Wanless then, NSPCC, they're at a strategic level with the Met, and the Met, of course, may be coming under criticism as a result of the Goddard inquiry if it ever gets started. And in fact, NSPCC themselves might come under some criticism should that inquiry ever get started. So how does that work if they are acting as the gatekeepers for everything that goes into the inquiry?
Well, because I personally don't think we're going to see any serious criticism of NSPCC, because if you're going to do the job properly, then the NSPCC call handlers and data people would have been vetted by the police before anything started. But how can the police possibly investigate somebody they're in partnership? And of course, Goddard's using Theresa May's own staff, and all the calls are being handled by NSPCC. So this is not an independent inquiry. This is a collaborative inquiry with Theresa May's Home Office. But on the subject of Theresa May, we better add a little bit more. Let's bring Eilish Angelini back in, because alongside rape, of course, this woman has also been brought in to act as an expert for inquiries into deaths in police custody. Better be careful what we say about the Met Police, Mike. So if we just have a look at this is policeprofessional.com with a big article about Miss Angelini, and she's going to be heading up the death in custody report. So if we have a look at that from Theresa May's point of view, she appointed Eilish Angelini to lead the investigation. And that's pretty timely because, of course, north of the border, we've got the horrific death of this black gentleman, Sheku Bayu. We know that several tons of policemen effectively crushed him, stopped him from breathing. Well, we're waiting for that to be confirmed, of course. But we just like to point out that the man defending the police against those terrible accusations is Peter Watson, and he's been working for the Police Federation. Why are we interested in Peter Watson? Well, of course, he just happened to be the lawyer acting for Eilish Angelini, who issued legal threats against Robert Green. Oh, and us as well, Mike.
Indeed he did.
In order to stop us reporting about the abuse of Holly Gregg. So that's a little bit of a strange coincidence, but we better just remind people that, of course, Peter Watson has been suspended as a judge in Scotland because he's implicated in the Heather Capital, I think it's a £400 million fraud or something of that thing. So what can we add in there? Well, Theresa May said of her good friend, Dame Eilish had all the qualities necessary to head the important review. And we can only say to that, of course she does, Theresa. It's almost becoming like something from Have I Got a Question? Have I
Got News for You?
Have I Got News for You?
Yeah.
Obvious that we've got a massive government cover-up here.
Right, well, I think we'll end on this one because we can't not mention this. Of course, I mentioned this article on Friday. Peers will have their wings clipped if they block tax credit cuts. And this was the threat from George Osborne and David Cameron. They were threatening that they would even appoint hundreds of new Conservative peers to completely subvert the work of the House of Lords if the issue of if the demands to cut tax credits was was stopped by the House of Lords, and of course that's exactly what they did. They stopped what Osborne was up to. This has really annoyed him quite a lot. In fact, he said, unelected Liberal and Labour Lords have defeated a financial matter passed by the elected House of Commons. This raises constitutional issues and needs to be dealt with. Well, I've got to say, Mr. Osborne, it does nothing of the kind. This is exactly what the House of Lords is supposed to do. If the House of Commons is doing something which is so clearly undemocratic, because let's remember, you may say that this was a financial matter, but this was being pushed through with a statutory instrument. It wasn't going through the proper process of an Act of Parliament. You were using a statutory instrument to push this through. It wasn't in your manifesto. You weren't elected on the basis of it. It was undemocratic, and you were attempting to bully the Lords into allowing you to do it. And of course, they quite wisely, for once, decided that they weren't going to take that. They've stuck their fingers up at you, and as well they should have. And you continue to threaten them because you're threatening them that this is a constitutional issue which needs to be dealt with. The House of Lords, of course, has been on the issue of the constitutional reform issue for quite a long time, and this will probably continue that debate. Whether they actually bring that front and centre of the constitutional reform agenda, we shall see. But nonetheless, the point here is that the House of Lords did their jobs for once.
Indeed. We shouldn't forget, of course, that Nick Clegg is still in the mix somewhere, isn't he, as a senior member of the Privy Council on constitutional matters?
Well, of course, but he's unlikely to be influential anymore.
If political parties exist, but we could discuss that.
We could, yes.
So, Mike, any last words for you?
Well, just on that point, it's £4 billion in tax credit cuts, right?
Something like that, yes.
That could easily be paid for out of the £12 billion smart meter budget. We could give people more, but obviously what we're again not being told is there's this empowerment message of the smart agenda, that you'll be able to see what you're using and hold your energy provider to account. We could do that with a £15 energy monitor. In contrast, the £12 billion smart meter programme is costing every home £400. So what we're talking about here is either a grossly over-engineered project and infrastructure, or the energy industry's next big scam.
Well, that ends it off nicely, I think, doesn't it?
We'll come back to the energy industry scam in due course. Mike, we're going to say thank you very much. Just a reminder to viewers and listeners, the website is stopsmartmeters.org.uk if you'd like more information on that. Mike, thanks very much for joining us. And we've got some items here we'll bring on to tomorrow on the economy, I think.
Yes.
So, Mike, thanks very much for joining us. It's been excellent. Thank you to our viewers and listeners. And I would just say that fairly shortly we're going to be talking about these wonderful items. This is a UK column pen, but it's not an ordinary pen. I have to say it's not smart. You're looking worried, Mike, actually.
It'll probably work then and be actually cost effective.
The only smart thing about it is it's got a very soft front, and this enables you to activate your tablet or...
That would be a smart device.
Oh, is it? It's a squidgy smart device, but we will shortly be offering these for sale. So if you would like this incredibly useful pen, or one like it, we'll tell you how to do that shortly. We better stop there.
Yes.
Thanks for joining us.
See you
Back same time tomorrow. Bye-bye.